Hi, hi everyone. My name is Ibadurrahman, and now I'm gonna make a poem analysis of "I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died" by Emily Dickinson. All right. Before we start to the analysis, let me recite the poem. All right. I represent you. "I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died" by Emily Dickinson. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in my room was like the stillness in the air between heaps of storm. The ice around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for the last onset when the king be witness in the room. I wheeled my keepsake, sign away what portion of me be signable, and then it was there, interposed a fly. With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. Alright, that's the poem I just recited. It was written by Emily Dickinson. And for the first part, I'm gonna explain, I'm gonna discuss about Emily Dickinson's background. I'm gonna write that down that during Emily Dickinson's early years, she experienced the death of many people close to her, including, that of her cousin. It's easy to see why she felt familiar with that in this poem. In time of sorrow, she would like to have some sermons about salvation, paradise, and mansion waiting in eternity. During her lifetime, many of her close family members and friends joined the church, as the 1830s saw that many referred to as revivals or awakenings, in which many people proclaimed that faith in Jesus Christ and eternal life. I heard a fly buzz when I died. This poem makes it very clear that the author, at some point in her life, viewed that as something sweet and gentle. This poem, like her many other poems about death, reveals that something is different for her. She doesn't believe that she herself will experience seeing the warm light and being welcomed into an afterlife in paradise. Not particularly like that. Now we're moving on. On the physical aspect, the literary devices that we used in this poem. The author makes use of several literary devices in I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. These include, but are not limited to, enchantment, repetition, or even alliteration. The latter is gone type of repetition. Ones that focus on the use and consonant sounds at the beginning of word, for example, stillness and storm in line 3 and 4 of the first stanza, as well as blue and between in, if I'm not mistaken, on the fourth stanza in the lines 1 and 2. To explain something about enjambment. Enjambment is another common technique that concerns with the transition between lines, and the poet cuts off the line before the conclusion of a sentence phrase before its natural conclusion. For example, between lines 2 and 3 of the first stanza, well, as lines 2 and 3 for the first stanza. That's like the example of that. Okay, right now I'm gonna explain a little. Before we're moving to the more details of the literal device, I'm gonna talk about what is this? What is the poem about? This poem about a condition of the first person perspective in a transition between life and death, which we know as dying, of course. It describes the feeling and the situation in the process of that in this poem. The buzzing sound from a fly in the middle of stillness and echoing sound showed a feeling of regret and not accepting the reality that they are going to die. The poem describes the scene and the atmosphere. At the moment when someone dies, with a weird surprise thrown in, the speaker starts by mentioning the sound of fly, which cuts across the heavy, silent air around her deathbed. The speaker leaves that image behind and begins to talk with the room where she's dying. She tells us about people standing around her who are calmly preparing themselves for her final moment. And it even tells us about giving away last of her possession to show that everything is truly ready. Yeah, what portion be assignable. Then, so when everything in place and as it should be, here comes that fly. It's an intruder, a weird, unnecessary kind of gross little bug that wasn't exactly happy poem to start with, but it was a sort of peaceful. And when the fly shows up, everything changes and the things get stranger and a lot less quiet and comfortable at the moment. All right. After I'm explaining about the poem about, now I'm gonna explain the meanings and the lexical or everything in the stanza. We have 4 stanza here, and I'm gonna explaining it from the first stanza. All right. Moving from the first line, I heard a fly buzz when I died. Basically, it's just the title. Let's check out how fast this poem gets going, and how much the author Emily Dickinson can do in the first line. I heard a fly buzz when I died. She starts out with a sound like a pretty boring observation. Okay, so you heard a fly buzz, but there's no one of the author's famous dashes. And the other shoe drops when I died. Just 3 words and shells make them sound like an afterthought. It as like she was saying, I heard the fly buzz and then I squashed it. But those 3 words makes all the difference. Suddenly, this is a ghost story, and we realize that the speaker of this poem is dead and telling us about this fly from beyond the grave. The association between flies and that are gross and spooky too. She's letting us know that isn't going to be some peaceful little nature poem about fly. And be sure to keep an eye on those dashes in the poem, as a lot of people have tried to edit them like out of Dickinson's work. Like, oh my god, this is the art came from the line, the dashes. What would be like this line if we didn't have the pauses in the middle of the end? Alright, maybe that's all. That's a long explanation for just one line. Okay, I'll be moving to the next line, but I'm gonna explain more. Not only one line, but it is connected line 2, 3, and 4. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. Alright, and all of a sudden we move away from the fly, and the speaker starts to tell us a bit more about the scene of her death. She sets up for these few lines is the atmosphere of the room. That she really want to, the lack of sound. The room is the exact opposite of the harsh, annoying buzz of the fly. She emphasizes with a simile, comparing the stillness of the room with the stillness during a lull in storm. Alright. There might be the rush of Basti followed by the mysterious journey of the death, or they might be have a literal halves of dying person as their body goes through the final spans of its life. The opening of I heard a fly buzz when I died is rather starting, and Dickinson's intends for it to shock her readers. The praise I heard a fly buzz initially gives the reader the idea that this is going to be a rather boring poem about nothing particular, but then, after a short pause marked by the dash, the speaker informs that the audience that she heard the fly buzz at the moment of her death. And suddenly, the readers become aware The reader becomes aware that the rest of this poem will be spoken by a voice from the other side. She draws a sharp contrast between the sound of buzzing fly and the stillness in the room when she dies. In the last part of the stanza, the speaker emphasized the way that the room felt. The stillness of it was thick, and the stillness that can be felt on calm settled between storms. Moving on, we're going to stanza 2. The first and second line of the stanza, which is the fifth and sixth line of the poem, the eyes around had wrung them dry and breaths were gathering firm. Alright, now that we have feel for the mood that makes sounds of the atmosphere, we get to see a little bit more of the room. The speaker tells us that the eyes around had wrung them dry. That's not a lot of information, but it's all we need to build up an image of friends and family that must be around her, around us, when the moment of death. When she tells us that these days, these eyes are dry. We also learn a lot about a particular moment in this poem. People have been crying, their eyes were wet, but now they are not. Maybe they feel exhausted, resigned, or even now at peace. We are in an emotional lull between all of the crying that comes before that and all that will come after. Even the breathing of the watchers, or maybe of the speakers, has even out as they prepare themselves quietly for what is to come. Alright, can you hear the way she's adding the sound in the poem and the sucking them back out? She does that. There used to be a crying and harsh, right breathing, were just stillness. Line 7 and 8, or third and fourth line on the second stanza. For the last onset, when the king be witness in the room. What we're probably expecting, and while those that's dry probably watching for her, and this is the moment when the things change forever, when a person is really gone, when their chest when the chest heaves for the last time. This is what Dickinson calls the last onset in the seventh line. Who is this king? Okay, for the last on king, when the king be witness. What is the king? Okay, again, we can't be absolutely sure what is the king for, but in my opinion, it will be hard for 19th century American reader to see the capital K king here without thinking about God. So, this is, in my opinion, the king in this poem is referring to God, the king of the world. But Dickinson isn't a conventional religious poet, and she could have said the Lord or even Jesus if she wanted to make the point clear. So maybe the king is just that, and the end. Wait for everyone. Maybe it will be funnier and cooler if it turned out to be Elvis, but it's always 100 years early for that, unfortunately, because the king is, Elvis is the king himself, and in the second stanza, the speaker shifted her focus of light as contrasted in the stillness in the room, and she begins to describe the people that she's sitting around her, and she describes their eyes as dry. Not because no one cried over her death, it's because everyone has already cried, and their tears, they cry. And that is why it describes the eyes are wrung them dry. The speakers continues to describe the stillness of the room when she said she could hear the breath of the people around. The last onset. It's not clear whether the king in this stanza is God or the angel of death, but to whoever she referred for, she expects that he will show up in the room at the moment of her death. Third stanza. I will my keepsakes sign away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there, an interpose fly. Now the speaker switched gear a bit, and we heard about the king, and we are expecting a big event. Instead, Dickens backs up that point, and the speaker talks about the giving away her possession. In her final act, the speaker gives up the little things that she won't be needing anymore, her keepsakes as she calls them. Some part of herself and her life will stay behind after she leaves the world. That's the part that she refers to as assignable, or another way of saying able to give away. Able to give away. I mean, yeah. You can say that rela in Indonesian, of course. Okay, the pretty quiet, the calm, regular sounding moment of the poem until the end of cliffhanger. And then it was. Line 12, there interposed a fly. Then, all of a sudden, the fly is back. It breaks into the poem, interrupting the quaint little deathbed skin. Dickinson tells us that the flies interposed, that means came between two things. It is an important word, it tips of us that this fly is an intruder. With this third stanza, the speaker suggests that everything was perfect and she was ready for that. Before the intruding fly interposed, she claims that all she had, all of her keepsakes designated to certain people. Her will was in order. The room was peaceful and the air was still, but when the fly buzzed and interrupted her peaceful moment of death. The last stanza. I'm gonna explain the first line first. With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz. This fly isn't some kind of graceful, beautiful insect like butterfly. No. The speaker emphasized that the sound of fly, or what she called blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz. This is a really great line by the author. Do you feel how the poem itself stumbles uncertainly? Right there. Think of how a fly buzzes around the lands and then the buzzes around again. Those dashes break up the line with pauses just like fly breaks off its flight. The sounds of the word buzz mimics the sounds of the fly. Moving on to the next line, the 14th line of the poem, between light and me. Here, when they learned the fly interposed, it was coming between the speaker and the light. Interposed between the speaker and the light. It's interrupting. And again, it's a cheesy needed experience. In any case, the fly has messed the things up. We are moving quietly toward the light, and this poem was moving toward a normal ending. And then this stupid fly showed up. Sorry, or maybe made it much better because if you happen like Dickinson, slightly twisted perspective. The last two lines, line 15 and 16 of the poem. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. And then just like that, it's over. The speaker tells us that the windows failed. As far as we can tell, that means that her eyes closed. The windows referring to her eyes. What we're dealing with her. Of course, Dickinson has to put her own twist on the moment. The speaker tells us that she could not see to see. This doubles the feeling of isolation, of change, the veiler of the sense. It's a haunting way of talking about the moment of death. Even so, it's a little hard for us to say exactly what she's describing here, of what is see to see, but we think it's the last image meant to be, or even impossible to pin down. The speaker has crossed over the other side, and the experience can't quite be put into words. And I could not see to see. The Dickinsons, the author, doesn't go out of her way making you feel better. She just lets you sit with two final images: a weird little fly, and the dark emptiness. Creepy, huh? Okay, and there's a spiritual message of what can I say? The poem. It is a spiritual message that they reminding the reader that the experience of death is an inevitable situation that everyone will be facing at any time we could not expect it. This poem rings a bell in our mind that someday that will come to us. It shows us the atmosphere of feeling when we are dying. The stillness in the room, and the echoing sounds of people crying, standing around, sound of bus and flies tumbling in the middle of stillness and showed a feeling of regret. Spirituality is another term that lurking around the edge. I heard a fly buzz when I died. It deals with the dead and what comes after. The speaker herself is dead because that there was pretty much need some spiritual framework to deal with what's going on here. The author doesn't come out and say what happens after that, but with all this talk about the king, the final onset, and so forth, it definitely has to be in our mind. And maybe we're moving on to the lexical part, the figurative language, the poem device, the poetic device. We'll start with the simile here. The second line of the first stanza, the stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air, an example of simile. Here she compares the quietness of the room, with the stillness of the air, of course, and I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's synodoche, a figure of speech which part meant to present the whole, the eyes around it, wrung them dry here. The eyes here represent a room of full people. And the next poetic device we have a symbolism. In this poem, the uncertain little fly could symbolize the old author's own uncertainty in that, as contrasted with the security of the people around her seem to feel. And we have alliteration here. The word see in I could not see the sea is an example of alliteration. Consonants, the son of Aaron's eyes around had wrung them dry, is a consonance. The assonance, the son of E in and breathing and breaths were gathering firm, and I in I heard a fly buzz is an example of assonance. And we also have a metaphors here, like the fly represent the physical death, and since she uses windows to compare with the speaker's eyes, the windows failed, the eyes is closed. And she described the quiet moment, it's storms and full of energy. We have no hyperbole here, but we have personification. The last two lines of the second stanza examples of the personification. When the king be witnessed in the room, as if the dead is a human and he is seen in the room. Last onset, it means a percentage when he or she dies, oxymoron. And we also have a onomatopoeia when the Emily used the word buzz in the first and last stanza. We also have an enjambment, like I explained before. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air. It's connected. Okay, now maybe I will discuss about what the meaning of the figure are in this poem. We have the fly, we have the storm, we have the eyes, we have the king, and also windows, like I explained before. And I will make it clearly, and I will explain it more about it. We're starting for the first one. It's the fly at buzzing. If you haven't seen The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, you should probably go and rent it because it's very awesome. We won't give too much away of little fly messes and everything up in the movie, and that's pretty much what happens here. This starts as normal, that scene, but then the fly gets in the way and changes everything. And the first line, the first image we get is poem with the pesky fly, but we don't see it yet. We just hear it buzz, and that's great, the word, because it describes the noise the fly makes, but the sound of the word is also imitates the sound of the fly, and that's what English teachers calls onomatopoeia. That buzzing sound cuts across in the quiet in the room. We get a whole landscape of sound before we even see the fly in this room. Alright, we're moving on to the storm. This work hard and gives us a sense what the atmosphere is. And like this, she wants to build up a sense of how quiet, how calm, and maybe stifling is around in that, but maybe we haven't. We yeah, it's not maybe we all never experienced that, but maybe some of us did, and coming back to life, we I never know. So she compares the situation of another one we may be more familiar with. That's the point, and yeah, there is the eyes. I mean, yeah, we don't get to see who else in the room and the dying speaker, but she does help us by telling that the eyes around means that it helps to fill in the blanks of the scene. At first we are just dying person and a fly, but now we can start to imagine that room is taking place with complete with crying onlookers. That's everyone around the eyes that around them dry, and after crying, this is very well for me. And the last one, the windows. On a simple level, we think that the windows probably just a fancy way of saying eyes, but it comes pretty important moment. And if she picked the specific image, we're willing to bet that she want to spend time with it. I'm running out of my breath. 26 minutes. Oh my god. All right. When we think of the sound devices, the rhyme, the structure of the poem. I Heard a Flybus When I Died by Emily Dickinson is a four-stanza poem that is separated into sets of 4 lines, known as quatrains. This quatrains follows by a very loose rhyme of seam of A B C B, not A B C D, not A B A B, not A B B. It's A B C B. It's changing end sound between the stanzas. The majority of the rhymes in the 4 stanzas are half rhymes, meaning that the only part of the words rhyme, for the example, room and storm in the first stanza. There's also example exact time with the room ends with the 4 line of the first stanza and line 4 of the second stanza. So it's not particularly in one what to say that in one stanza we have the same rhyming, but it's rhymed by stanza. Okay, we're moving to iambic meter. Iambic. When you read the poem through, you did not notice the certain smooth even feeling to the lines. That's because this is a regular rhythmic poem in some ways, but not in every way. We'll explain. To start with, all these lines are written in perfect iambic meter. That means the lines are divided into 2 syllable chunks, and with the emphasis of the second syllable, the length of the sections, the lines are obviously regular. There's a 4th section, aka 4 stanza, and 4 line in each stanza. The first and the third lines each stanza have 8 syllables, and a fancy name that iambic thread meter, tetrameter. The second and fourth line each have 6 syllables or 3 meter iambic, making the poem is a regular to textual work. So we know this went out of her way to give it a smooth and rhythmic feel, but the other was a normal poet. So even though that she sets up in a happy iambic meter, she finds all kinds of way to break it up too. So for one thing, this poem doesn't really rhyme. Well, okay, there's one big exception, lines 14 and 16 end the poem with me and C, when there's few other spots where sounds are repeated at the end of the line, but these are exceptions of proof that the rule we are a long way from a nice, normal, nursery rhyme sound that, then there are loose dashes. That's what again I explain of the iambic in this stanza and in this poem, in every line of the stanza of this poem. Now I'm gonna talking about, hold a minute. Okay, I'm gonna talk about the tone of the poem. Okay, and the tone of the poem is calm, dreamy, and almost completely relaxed, as if the speaker was floating away. We think that tone makes her sound just like a ghost, and it makes this poem spookier. And we think the poem sounds very rude. On little dashes where we get bursts of sun and then a pause and then another burst is like listening to someone flipping through the station on the radio. You hear a quick flash of something and tantalizing little bit of music and then a moment of silence. Ooh. Moving to the setting. The setting, the room where the speaker dies. So, the room here, the author is in a lot of help with the setting. She tells us that we are in the room, but not at a lot else. And okay, that's fair. We know that we're looking for a deathbed, and that brings us kind of image. We can imagine that the room is warm, maybe a little stuffy smell or disinfectant. There are people around who have been crying but have recently stopped because they had the eyes had wrung them dry. We're moving to the point of view, since this speaker is about at the moment when she is dying, she aims to save. Assume that she's kind of ghost or spirits. We think that it lost draft to. So do you hear any emotion of this line? We're facing that. That's all. It's everything. I have explained everything about this poem. Alright, maybe that's all. Thank you very much for watching this poem. This poem analysis, I mean. Alright? See you on the next video. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.